Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with Blue Prism. Today on the Generation Digital Workforce podcast, my guest is Moshé Dickerman, an expert principal within Bain & Company's Automation Center of Excellence. I will be talking with Moshé about how companies across all industries will be utilizing the digital workforce as a cost reduction lever post-COVID-19. Moshé, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Brad.
So Moshé, why don't you start by just telling us about yourself and your career background?
Sure, thank you. So prior to joining Bain, I spent a little bit over 20 years doing what I'm going to call operational excellence, process improvement type of work, and deployment of automation solutions, mainly in the financial services industry, and specifically within two of the top 10 global banks that do this type of work. And then since I've been with Bain, I've been focused on helping and advising and supporting companies in both what we call our financial services practice, which focuses on banks and insurance companies, and also our performance improvement practice, which really looks at the capability itself, agnostic of the actual type of company. And I would say that the overall type of work and the involvement that I've had, it's been an interesting view, if you may, of how this evolution of this not only methodology of how to do process excellence, how to do process improvement, but the injection of technology and the injection of automation into all of this has been a fascinating trajectory to see how fast and all of the new tools that are out there to do this type of work. So very excited to be here and talk a little more about that.
Excellent. So Moshé, when most people think about Bain & Company, they think about corporate strategy, organizational and operational improvement, large-scale transformations, etc. How and where does robotic process automation fit into that?
It's a good question. And I would say that it actually fits in all of the categories you just mentioned. When you think about the baseline or the top of the house on this type of environment, when companies setting up their strategy, they're looking at their organization, they're looking at how to improve operationally, and then obviously when they're looking at transformations, all of those major buckets of activities have what I would say a lot of processes that today and in the past have been mainly done in a manual way. So they're intensive manually, large volumes, they take time, and both in capital as far as the type of money being spent on them, and human capital also in the effort required to do that type of work. And where RPA comes in is to try to make that a more efficient process, try to flatten that process itself to make it more straight through, and overall really to try to I would say make all of the different activities and levers that are happening actually work in a more efficient, faster, and error-free way. And that's, I think, where RPA really plays a great role in all of that.
Okay. So, Moshé, would you say that automation via the digital workforce has become part of the Bain playbook for helping companies, solve complex issues across the enterprise? Is this the new norm?
Yes, that is correct. I think if kind of that earlier comment that I had been making earlier, which was around the different levers and how this is used. In the old days, there were a lot of different, activities and exercises and ways to achieve how to maximize efficiencies, how to make things simpler, how to lower cost, for example, if you're doing a transformation. I think the enablement of what RPA brings to the table, it injects that, that digital way of thinking and the way of actually automating how you do today, mainly a manual process, into every single step of what you do. So for sure, when we look at some of these issues that companies that we talk to about, I think having that mindset in the back of our mind, this is pretty much a standard component of how we talk to clients, and looking at, again, one of the other, I'm going to say, tools in the toolkit that we can use around this.
Great to hear your perspective on that. Thank you. As companies emerge from the lockdown due to COVID-19, what can we expect them to focus upon in the near term, and what role will automation play in this?
It's a very important role. I would say that when you look at, I'm going to say, a whole new world order that's coming out of what's happening with COVID-19, I think companies are realizing, a lot of their potential activities or efforts or overall strategies of how they were going, whether it's, to market, how they were interacting with customers, how their operations worked. I think all of it is being revised because of what is happening and kind of how they see things evolving with what's after the lockdown, if you may, from COVID-19. And where automation really plays in is I'm going to say it's a very critical role in all of it, because I think companies are realizing that in a lot of the different instances, they're looking to reduce cost. They're looking to free up cash flow. They're looking to, again, drive those efficiencies. And they're trying to do that in an error-free, fast possible way so that they can actually get to that component of, I'm going to say, fortifying their infrastructure and the company for whatever the future may bring to them.
That's really interesting. How is the digital workforce different from other more traditional cost reduction methods?
So I think the first one that I think is a significant change is the speed at which this can be deployed. In the normal, traditional, I'm going to say, IT or system implementations, I'm going to say that the timing is a large factor as far as how long it takes, the amount of effort, whether it's, again, in capital or in both human and financial. And one big difference is the speed. When you think about specifically RPA, it is a technology that's really based on being able to be deployed very fast at a fraction of the cost that some of the other, I'm going to say, heavier infrastructure-wise technologies and timeframe-wise, solutions that are out there. And so I think the speed is one key component that is a differentiator there. The other one is how this is deployed in a company. If you think about, again, larger IT type of deployments or solutions that are out there, they're really focused on the IT side of the house, right? So, the how the prioritization is done, how the budgeting is done, what kind of functionality is driven primarily by the technology side of the house versus the business. And I think the big difference is this type of technology, specifically RPA, is truly the way that it, I'm going to say, works. You get the most out of it, is really for it to be business driven. And where we see the most success is when it is business driven. It's set up in a business type of part of the organization as opposed to the IT side. And I think the last one is, thinking about it from a perspective of, it's kind of like digital labor. If you think about it, it's just another tool in the toolkit to be able to help overall an organization in what they need to do and how to do it in a more efficient way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what about those companies who have not done anything with digital labor? Is it viable for them to consider adding this capability in the short term as we come out of the pandemic?
For sure. I believe that a lot of companies are already doing that. They're already thinking about it. They're definitely looking at ways to potentially try this in potential areas and ways that they had not thought of. Back to, I think, what the new environment that COVID-19 has brought upon us, and I believe that a lot of companies at one point, even if they were at least thinking and testing and trying out a lot of the different automation technologies, given where we are today, I think it has accelerated the urgency and the need, and also the use case as to why automation programs or automation solutions could definitely help with all of the potential future strategies and future ways of working that a company may have.
Excellent. How should companies rapidly identify the best processes to automate so that they prioritize their efforts appropriately?
So it's a term that I would call a process discovery. Yeah, if you think about the two main components of this type of work, it really boils down to two areas. One is the actual process itself, as the other one is the data. And if you think about those two as the backbone of any of these activities or any of these efforts, starting with the process, you really can have an understanding of, what is really happening within a specific situation, what are the levers that could be pulled to change it, how to mitigate potential issues, and that includes the data as well. And I think the biggest piece here is to understand your process, and I would say tweak it if possible, make sure it's stable, and then automate, because it goes back to the old saying, if you may, that it's garbage in, garbage out. If you were to automate a bad process, you potentially can make that even worse. And so I think that, from an experience perspective, what we have seen is ensuring you spend the proper time in a process, and the process discovery phase is critical to make sure that you have a successful deployment of this type of technology.
Okay, that makes sense. Where do you typically see companies begin their digital workforce journey?
Yeah, I would say that the areas that I have experienced the most use around this has really been in the corporate functions area. So your typical finance, your typical HR, your typical, I'm going to say vendor management, any of those support functions within a company are one of the main entry points. And the other one I would say it's equally as focused is the operational area. Anything that has to do with the servicing of customers, anything that has to do with those large volumes, large transactions, those are typically the other areas where we typically see this type of work.
In addition to cost reduction, are you seeing clients utilize digital labor to achieve other business outcomes as well? For example, customer satisfaction improvement, revenue enhancement, etc.?
Yes, actually, what we usually have conversations around is, for companies to go through this activity, it is critical that they focus on more than one lever, if you may. So if a company is going through this type of exercise, and let's say cost is the only lever that they're focused on, they're not going to really achieve, if you may, the full potential of this automation journey. And so what we really try to look at it is that more balanced view. Cost can definitely be one of the big levers, but definitely the customer experience is usually another one that we talk about. You talked about revenue enhancement for sure. The other ones that we really look at as well is the reduction of rework. And I would say increasing productivity, increasing the quality of the type of work, right? The reduction in the errors, etc. So really the conversations around a more holistic way of looking at it, as opposed to focused on one, I'm going to say, track, like, for example, cost. Again, it's not going to bring you the full benefits and the full potential of what this technology can bring for a company.
What are some of the challenges that companies face when they start utilizing digital labor?
Yeah, so one of the I'm going to say the number one challenge that I have seen companies go with is that they try to tackle either too complex of a process or too many processes that have complexity built into them from the very beginning. So, and there's a couple of reasons why this usually ends up in I'm going to say turning out into a not sustainable or a bad experience. The complexity drives time, the complexity drives effort, etc. And then usually when that happens, if something goes wrong, it kills the momentum of the overall journey and the overall program. And so what we've typically seen as far as, that challenge specifically is to try to work on more, let's say less complex processes. Let's not, boil the ocean, if you may, when you're going through this journey, because that will drive the positive momentum to try to mitigate, I would say, that challenge that you go. And I think the other challenge that's pretty high on the list is, the top-down versus bottom-up approach. When you're going through this journey, it's critical that it's a top-down approach from the organization, right? Having that support, having the guidance, having, all of that from the very beginning really helps versus trying to make these changes, get the organization behind you from the bottoms up. And so those, I would say, are the two main challenges that I've dealt with when dealing with companies around this.
Okay. So Moshe, I know that you do a lot of work with clients in Latin America. So I thought it'd be interesting just to get your assessment of the maturity of RPA in that region of the world and how and understand how you expect that to change in the near term.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting viewpoint, I would say, from what's going on in Latin America. One of the big differences, I would say, between Latin America and I would say some of the other regions, and this kind of applies to some areas, to some parts of the world, let's say Asia, for example. Labor costs and what I would call labor arbitrage is a key component when you're looking at RPA, when you're looking at these types of transformations. And as you probably know, in Latin America and Asia, labor rates are relatively much lower than when you look at North America and Europe, etc. And so typically the challenge that comes to this is how do you equate, and back to the point of if you're only looking at that one view and that one lens of cost, how do you get a company to say, yes, I will invest in this type of technology, even though the technology itself may cost a little higher than potentially, having people like actual FTEs. And so I think the biggest piece there, and this is something that I've seen quite a bit in Latin America, is really, again, looking at that holistic view. And, of it can't just be about cost. It can't just be about the labor arbitrage. It has to be about some of these other components. And where I see a lot of potential is a lot of these companies, and you have some very fast forward companies that mainly in financial services is what I've seen in Latin America, that are, I'm going to say, almost best in class in using automation type of technologies, far more than, for example, a counterpart in North America. They do still, again, these are the far and few. It's not like a norm. It's not out there completely. But there's a lot of potential, and a lot of companies are seeing the value. As more and more of these companies go through that journey, they're really understanding that that cost lever cannot be the only piece to the puzzle as they're trying to figure out how to make their organizations better, more efficient, and obviously from a shareholder and stock and stakeholder perspective to try to make this a more viable product or company. They're really looking at all of these levers to try to push that forward. And so I do think that financial services, I think, specifically banks, I think in Latin America are taking a lead in this type of work. I think insurance companies are second to that. I have seen quite a bit of push with, I'm going to say, retailers in Latin America also pushing this type of technology and journey to try to really understand that ecosystem and leverage how to get better at this. But it's still a journey. And so I would say that taking the labor arbitrage part out, they are really looking at that holistic view and trying to make the most out of this technology and test it in ways that in some ways are very advanced and more advanced than I would say some of their counterparts in other parts of the world.
Great. So Moshé, my last question for you, would you like to make any predictions for the balance of the year with regard to digital transformation?
I would say that if there was ever a time, I would say in the history of, and this is, this technology has been around for quite some time. It has matured quite a bit. And I would say that if there was ever a use case for using this type of technology for actually going through this transformation, this is probably the best time to be going through that. I think from the, I would say for the rest of the year, I think companies as they're going through the process of figuring out and going past the, I'm going to say the as we call it at Bain, act now and plan now, right? They're going through the first part, which is the act now, which is really trying to understand, what do they need to do to operate as they are today, and then obviously looking at the future, which is the plan now. I think that planning now has taken that digital infusion to a whole different level, and where automation comes in. Where maybe in the past it may not have been maybe top of mind or maybe in the top 5 areas of a company to really think about, it is definitely now one of the top 1 or 2 items that are most companies, I'm going to say, wish list or activities that they're really looking to pursue because they acknowledge and they see, I'm going to say, the rapid changes that the post-COVID-19 world is bringing upon us. So I think it's definitely a very exciting time to be in this space. I think the opportunities and the type of work that this is going to come out and the type of innovation that's going to come out of this is going to be quite interesting.
Moshé, thank you so much for chatting with me today on Generation Digital Workforce. I truly appreciate your insights, and I know our listeners will as well.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.